In this lesson, we're going to cover the concept of zero trust. In our current digital age, we are constantly being bombarded with digital threats that are more sophisticated than ever, and this continually is putting our traditional cybersecurity strategies to the test. Now, traditional cybersecurity strategies have always focused on using a strong perimeter defense, much like an old castle has strong walls and a moat around the castle to keep threat actors at bay. Now, the problem with these old school strategies, though, while they were effective in the past, is that they are no match for our modern networks. After all, castles were the pinnacle of security about 1,000 years ago, but these days, I could simply fly over them with a drone or a helicopter, and now I can attack anybody inside the castle, and those castle walls and that moat aren't doing anything to stop me. Well, this is exactly how most computer networks were secured over the past few decades. Cybersecurity experts had configured networks with strong external defenses by using things like firewalls, intrusion protection systems, and other perimeter defenses. But these days, many of our network devices are pretty much deperimeterized. Now, instead, we must protect all of our systems and data using multiple levels of encryption, secure protocols, data-level authentication, and other host-based protection mechanisms because using a perimeter-only structure is not going to keep us safe. Now, from an operational perspective, most people love deperimeterization because it allows us to reduce our costs, conduct business-to-business transactions from anywhere in the world, and has become increasingly more agile for us as organizations to use this type of deperimeterization. The move to the cloud, when combined with the rise of work from home, has really increased our ability to conduct secure operations within a deperimeterization architecture. Now, deperimeterization has occurred due to the migration into the cloud, the increase in remote work, people embracing mobile technologies along with the rapid adoption and use of wireless networks, as well as larger movements towards outsourcing and contracting. But this whole deperimeterization movement does really introduce a lot of risk to our organizations too, if we're not careful. So, to protect these deperimeterized networks, we can't simply rely on boundary or perimeter defenses. And instead, we need to implement a best practice which is now known as zero trust. Zero trust is used to ensure the security of your corporate network and your corporate data. Now, when we look at our traditional networks, we used to believe that our networks and our users were trusted because we gave them access to those systems. But under a zero trust model, that is simply not the case, and that is considered a good thing in our modern world. You may have heard the old saying, trust but verify, which was made famous by President Ronald Reagan back in the 1980s. But as cybersecurity professionals, we actually take this a step further. When we implement zero trust, we want to quote our favorite mantra, which is trust nothing and verify everything. And that really does sum up the entire architecture concept behind zero trust systems. With zero trust, we demand that verification happens for every device, every user, and every transaction within our network, regardless of where it came from. This means that whether a user is attempting to access a system from within our organization's physical office or from over the internet because they're doing it from home remotely, their identity and permissions are always going to be verified. This methodology also addresses the changing nature of work and the digital landscape that has moved to a deperimeterization while acknowledging the threats can emerge from both inside or outside of your networks. Now, in order to create a zero trust architecture, we're going to use two different planes. These are called the control plane and the data plane. Now, the control plane refers to the overarching framework and set of components that are responsible for defining, managing, and enforcing the policies related to user and system access within an organization. It provides a centralized way to dictate and control how, when, and where access is going to be granted to ensure that only authenticated and authorized entities can access specific resources. The control plane typically encompasses several key elements, including adaptive identity, threat scope reduction, policy-driven access control, and secured zones. First, we have adaptive identity. In zero trust, we assume that static, one-time verifications are not sufficient, so we must use adaptive identities that relies on real-time validation that takes into account the user's behavior, their device, their location, and other factors like that. By continually assessing these variables, our user identities are constantly adjusting and adapting to the environment in order to grant or restrict access to them as required. Second, we have threat scope reduction. Now, in zero trust, we want to limit our users' access to only what they need for their work tasks because this drastically reduces the network's potential attack surface. This approach is focused on minimizing the blast radius that could occur in the event of a breach and ensures that the compromised credentials will not allow attackers to have unimpeded access throughout your entire network or system. Third, we have policy-driven access control. Now, the policy-driven access control is going to develop, manage, and enforce user access policies based on their roles and responsibilities. By defining clear policies, organizations can ensure that users only have access to data that is pertinent to their role in order to reduce the potential for successful data breaches against your organization. Fourth, we have secured zones. Now, secured zones are isolated environments within a network that are designed to house sensitive data. Only users with the appropriate permissions can access these zones, and this creates a further layer of protection. Now, in addition to the control plane, we also have something known as the data plane that we have to use to properly implement Zero Trust. While the control plane lays out the policies and procedures, the data plane is going to ensure those policies are being properly executed. The data plane is going to consist of the subject system, the policy engine, the policy administrator, and the policy enforcement point. First, we have the subject system. The subject system refers to the individual or entity attempting to gain access. This could be an employee, a workstation, or even a software application. The primary objective is to verify the authenticity of the subject or system before granting access to them to be able to access your sensitive data or systems. Second, we have the policy engine. Once the subject's identity is verified, the policy engine cross-references the access request with its predefined policies. Think about it like a rulebook that determines whether the request aligns with the subject's permissions. Third, we have the policy administrator. Now, the policy administrator is an essential part of the Zero Trust model that's going to be used to establish and manage the access policies. This is the entity that dictates who gets access to what and ensures that the policies align with the organization's security protocols and business objectives. Fourth, we have the policy enforcement point. The policy enforcement point is the final step in the process, and this is where the decision to grant or deny access is actually going to be executed. Based on the verification from the subject or system and the policy engine's determination, the policy enforcement point will then allow or restrict access, and it will effectively act as a gatekeeper to the sensitive areas of your systems or networks. So remember, Zero Trust is a cybersecurity approach that assumes no user or system is trusted by default, and it requires continuous verification for access to your organization's resources, regardless of the location or origin of your network request. Zero Trust is more than just a security trend, though. It really is the acknowledgement from the cybersecurity community that we're facing an ever-evolving digital landscape where threats can come from outside or inside of your network. While traditional perimeter-based defenses still hold value and they should be used, they are increasingly going to be insufficient on their own to protect your system solely by using the perimeter. So, as we navigate an age of remote work, cloud computing, and ever-increasing array of devices, Zero Trust principles do offer us a roadmap to creating a more robust and adaptable security posture. By integrating the Zero Trust strategies and using our control planes and data planes, organizations can proactively defend against threats by recognizing that trust is a commodity that must be earned, verified, and continuously reassessed at every enforcement point within your systems and networks.